So let me ask you a couple of things. Sure. Mention one thing and then ask you a couple more things. So this is-ought distinction is even more peculiar when you look deep into the neuroscience of perception. Okay, so one of the most influential books I ever read was An Ecological Approach to Visual Perception. And it's a classic text on perception and a very sophisticated one. And I don't think it has no pretensions to mysticism of any sort. And so that's kind of interesting given the conclusion. And the conclusion of the author is that what we see aren't facts or objects. We see meanings. So for example, a 6-month-old who crawls towards a visual cliff, which is a plate of glass stretched over or placed over a falling off place. The 6-month-old will stop. He won't crawl 7 months. I don't remember the exact age. He won't crawl across that piece of glass.
Right.
He doesn't see cliff and infer falling off place. He sees falling off place. And there's a condition called neglect, which is characteristic of certain people who have prefrontal lobe damage. It's not neglect, it's called utilization behavior.
Yeah.
And these people lose the ability not to act in the presence of a meaningful object. So if they walk down the hall and the door is open, they will go through the door. If you put a cup in front of them, they cannot stop but pick it up because they don't see cup and infer drinking. They see drinking object directly. And so even that is-ought distinction is deceptive in a very fundamental sense because it's predicated on the idea that what we see are meaningless objects and that we lay an overlay of meaning on top of that. And it's not by no means obvious at all that that's how we see.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why it's been so difficult to make machines that can see and act in the real world, because the object world is not simple. And that value structure that you're describing, that value structure, right? That is embedded in all of our perceptions in ways that we are only beginning to understand scientifically.
Yeah, there's so many ways in which our, what's called folk psychological sense of what our minds do is just completely broken, right? I mean, we have a sense of the tools we're using to do anything, the beliefs, desires, perceptions, expectations, the movement of attention, right? And our sense of what all of this is from the first person side has definitely broken apart in many respects as we've studied these things neuroscientifically and psychologically from the third person side. And understanding ourselves, understanding the world and our place within it and what's possible is inevitably a marriage of those two sides. I mean, you can't fully banish first person experience because most of what we know about ourselves has a cash value in terms of the experiential side. I mean, there's, to take the greatest case, there's simply no evidence of consciousness anywhere in the universe, but for the fact that we know it to exist in ourselves from the first person side. I mean, you can't look at a brain, even a living one, and form any intuition that it's a locus of consciousness. It's only by correlating changes in the experience of living people with, tools of neuroimaging in this case, or things like EEG, where we say, okay, well, when the brain's doing that, there's something that it's like to experience those changes, right? And we pretend rather often to take the third person science side off the gold standard of first person experience and say, okay, well, that's really, the mind may be an illusion, maybe even consciousness is an illusion. What we know is happening is there are brains that are processing information, and we've got things like synapses and neuromodulators and neurotransmitters, and that's the real stuff, right? That's the reality. This mind part is some kind of
right, that's a definition, not an observation.
It's just a tissue of confusion.
By reality,
right?
And that's a big problem.
Yeah, you can't banish the side which is in fact cashing out so many of your claims about the nature of, in this case, the brain, but that's not to say that we can't be deeply mistaken from the first person side about what our minds are doing. I mean, so, as we've indicated here already, I'm an enormous fan of meditation. I think it's indispensable for understanding certain things about the nature of the mind. But you can't even tell that you have a brain by meditating, right? Much less what it's doing, right? So there's things that there are some major blind spots in first person experience, no matter how you train experience. But you can notice, for instance, that the sense of self, the sense that you're a subject interior to your experience, that you're a kind of a locus of a consciousness that is appropriating experience, that is an illusion, or at best a convention, right? A kind of construction that you can cease to construct